This is Locked On Sports Atlanta, and it's time for the Atlanta Football Party, only on Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Atlanta Football Party, your home for the best Atlanta Falcons football talk. It's local insight you can't get anywhere but here at Locked On. I'm your host, Tanisha Batiste. Alongside me are Falcons analyst Jarvis Davis and Locked On Falcons host Aaron Freeman. Our girl, senior Falcons reporter Tori McElhaney will be back next week. And our Atlanta Football Party is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So is the cost too high to retain Drew? We'll discuss and we'll chop it up on retaining or releasing other free agents. We'll also look back at the running back room. And one guy said, no thanks to Nola. Well, with a certain ranking, that's understandable, but we'll get into it. But first, is D-Day for 18 coming sooner than expected? So Jarvis, the Falcons are, of course, expected to part ways with Kirk Cousins, who's guaranteed to make $27.5 million in 2025. That number, however, could have another $10 million added to it if Cousins is still on the Falcons roster on March 17th. According to ESPN's Jeremy Fowler, the Falcons' decision should come before Cousins' bonus is due. Quote, that's sort of an artificial deadline for him to find a new team. So for you, does this make the picture any clearer than it was last week as far as when or how the Falcons will part ways with Cousins?
Oh, it's been clear ever since they benched this man. All you got to do is just look at the money and see what makes sense and think about what factors come into this, right? Because I feel like, this whole no trade clause, that's a big piece in this. And we had this conversation before on this podcast before, and Aaron and I have talked about it on Locked On Falcons as well. It's just like, man, like the Falcons need to cut bait and move on and understand what the situation is and stop delaying the inevitable, because teams who are actually interested, I know we're going to get into that a little bit later, they're just waiting for the shoe to drop. So yeah. I think right now, like Jeremy Fowler ain't breaking no news, man. Like, give me some inside information, dog. Like, we knew this. The people that cover this,
like the conversations are being had today or yesterday, or give us something. Yes.
Yeah, they teams around the league know exactly what the Falcons have to do because that's the only thing that really makes sense, right? That's feasible that they have control over. So it's just cut the dude before this whole $10 million kicks in for the 2026 year and just move on. This is where I'm at with it.
Aaron, how about for you? Does this new, and I'm putting it in air quotes, information make the picture any clearer from last week as far as when or how the Falcons will let go or part ways with Cousins?
I mean, maybe for other people, but as Jarvis said, like what day was it? Like December 18th when they benched Kirk Cousins? Nothing's changed. And we said on December 18th, they're probably going to cut him, and nothing has changed since then. And so if people have been in denial for the last 2 months about what was going to happen with Kirk Cousins, maybe this information sort of moves the needle for you. But like, it's just kind of a formality at this point. Like the Falcons are basically hoping that like they can make some phone calls between now and the start of the league year and that March 16, 17 deadline, and basically just entice a team like, hey, if you want to get in the front of a line with, Kirk Cousins, hey, send us a 7th round pick or something like that. And maybe that works. Maybe like if a team is just truly desperate to just have an option at quarterback, maybe that works. But more than likely, I think every team is knowing like, we'll make the phone calls and then eventually the Falcons will release Kirk Cousins on a certain date. And then everybody will do the thing and we'll see what his market looks like and all that sort of stuff. So I just think it's a formality at this stage. And I guess Jeremy Fowler is just another person that seems to be hip to that formality, but it hasn't really changed the math as it's gone the last 2 months.
I would agree. And I think there's a word you used, Free, that depends on the day of the week, it seems like, and that's desperate because all of these teams allegedly are evaluating him. And hey, that's okay because right now, and this is kind of something funny I want to throw out to you guys. Respond if you want to, laugh if you want to, doesn't matter. But it seems like every show I was on, every game I had, whether it was football or basketball, the conversation or the topic of conversation was Kirk Cousins or Aaron Rodgers. And my recommendation was, that's Kirk. Like, that's not a question. Like, and I think the conjecture was, or the conversation was, well, Kirk, maybe he's a liar because he didn't tell the truth about what his status really was, or maybe the Falcons, what is going on with them. And I think it's just rather interesting what that commentary is, because remember we talked about how the back and forth chess match might impact who actually has the upper hand as it relates to other teams picking him up. So I just found that to be interesting. Don't know necessarily, Jarvis or Free, if that's going to dictate the terms of how he moves as far as the how, but I think if we don't know anything else, we know the win is coming, and the win is going to be sooner rather than later.
I mean, if you have to ask that question as to who you rather sign, if you have a choice between Aaron Rodgers and Kirk Cousins, like, come on, man, like what?
Yeah, maybe your front office is
right. Yeah, your front office needs to reevaluate themselves. Well, matter of fact, the owner needs to reevaluate who is in their position as the general manager, because Aaron is a poop show at this point.
Yeah, but it's been a thing, JD. I don't know why, but everywhere I go, yes, my other 5 gigs, everybody wants to know Aaron Rodgers or Kirk Cousins. I just want to share that with you guys.
Yeah, I don't want to trigger you this early in the show, but I can't.
No. Don't make me have another segment like I had on every other show last Thursday, Friday.
Well, I ain't gonna go there. It's too early to go there. Maybe I'll go there a little bit later. I ain't gonna go there right now. But like the reason why I feel like this, cutting Kirk Cousins makes sense, because we've seen it before. We saw it just last year with Russell Wilson. What, they had $85 million of dead cap, and he was like, shoot, I'm gonna get my money. I'm gonna sign for the veteran minimum. That's $1.2 million. And guess what? Whatever he signs for, the Falcons got to pay the rest. It kind of offsets, right? So he's going to be able to get out the rest of his money, still get his money from the Falcons, and take on another salary from another team. So that what makes sense. That's what would behoove a team like the Cleveland Browns would be one of those teams to kind of jump into the Kirk Cousins fold, or even the Jets, I think one of those two teams makes sense, because we've seen it before. Russell Wilson just did it, like, hey, I'm gonna get all my money from y'all, and I wouldn't be surprised at all if Kirk did the same.
And Jarvis, there are some teams out there, to your point, who could use a bridge quarterback that have either one of two things. Either they have a starting position that's open and Kirk Cousins could legitimately compete for that starting position, or it's the type of QB1 situation where Kirk wouldn't really be QB2. He'd be more like QB1B, because it's a situation where, you might be on shaky ground. I'm thinking Tennessee Titans as an example, because who knows, everybody's thinking that they're going to go after a quarterback, but they have so many needs, you never know. So there are some options where he might land. I think it just may be dictated to Free's earlier point about what the push and the pull can be as far as who feels like they're walking away from the negotiating table with a win, and hopefully both. Now, speaking of that then means that the Falcons QB room would be without Kirk, which means they'd be without a veteran. So who for you, JD, might be a good veteran QB for the Falcons to pursue to maybe back up Penix?
I would kind of touch on this a little bit before, but I think the guy that comes to mind for me, it has to be Jacoby Brissett. Like, I think Jacoby Brissett would be a guy. He's a veteran, been around the league, been a starter in this league before, and been solid, right? And I think that having a guy who's experienced a lot, who's seen a lot in the NFL, and just seen all the types of different coverages, and then those guys kind of have the same type of demeanor too. So I feel, having someone in there, and my guy, Bomani Jones, always talking about having a black up, right?
Wow, new term.
Yes, a black up. He has got to have a black up, right? Because sometimes, when you have a white counterpart, people tend to call for that guy, but I don't think that's going to happen here in Atlanta. I think that's Atlanta is a special case, special case study, but I think overall, but all seriousness though, I feel like Jacoby Brissett would be a good guy, because like you said, they have the same type of demeanor. He's been around the league, experienced, been in different systems, and I think that he'll be the type of guy that can come in and know exactly what his role is and be able to execute.
And Free, if I can just add to what JD said, or just kind of co-sign on it, that actually might give Jacoby Brissett the upper hand, even though he'd be the black up, because of the demeanor. We know the Falcons are all about fit. They want culture fit. And yes, that demeanor would actually work, I think, quite well with the Falcons organization and with Michael Penix Jr. But for you, Free, is there a guy, and I know we did kind of touch on it like Jarvis said last week, but is there a guy, as we loom closer to that decision, whom you feel might be also that good fit?
Yeah, I think there's, plenty of options out there, I think we touched upon it the other day, where it's like you want someone who has that veteran experience that can sort of be that extra set of eyes in the room for Michael Penix. You got guys like Case Keenum. He's done that these last couple of years with CJ
That's a good
Stroud
one,
in
yeah.
Houston, and has that experience playing in that offense, former teammate of TJ Yates, now the
Yeah.
Falcons passing game coordinator. So there is some familiarity there. I don't know if you're going to get Case out of Texas, because he seems like he just wants to play for his hometown team now for the to finish out his career or whatever.
Yeah.
But if you can lure him to Atlanta, I don't know, throw some Chick-fil-A into the bag or something like that. I don't know, but I think those are some of the guys that you look at that make sense for the Atlanta Falcons. I think Jacoby Brissett would be a good pickup. We'll see if Cleveland lures him there, because he's had some success, and maybe that will be a good selling point for Myles Garrett to basically say, "Hey, Myles, we brought back Jacoby Brissett. You remember
Remember him?
Yeah, he was decent, right?" I don't know, but yeah, I think there will be some options for the Falcons as far as that backup quarterback is concerned. I think going for a veteran that has some experience, that started some games, that's seen things, I think will be beneficial to Michael Penix Jr.
Yeah.
I have another one too. Free T.
Yes.
What do you all think about the Super Bowl MVP, Jameis Winston? Hey, you talking about a culture guy, a guy who's always got something to say, who don't mind, having a little fun with it, and then he's a guy that's really been there, right? Being a highly drafted player, being the guy, being the face of a franchise. He has that understanding as well, as far as what Michael Penix is about to get ready to go, take himself through as the first, his first year as a full-time starter, right? For 17 games. So I think, what do you all think about Jameis Winston? I think that
Have we forgiven Jameis for his shenanigans with the Saints, with the running up the score stuff? Are we past that?
I was never even mad. I wasn't even mad at that. To be honest, what you mean?
Okay. I wasn't either.
I know some people felt some type of way about it at the time.
They did, but they took.
He
took an L. He took an L for the team because they knew he was going to do that. Yeah. Well, you know what? Around the NFC South, time for you to make a pit stop here. What can you say?
Come on. Yeah, go ahead and knock all them out.
I know that, right? Yeah. And I know Terry Fontenot was already here during James's tenure, but in New Orleans, but ultimately that connectivity is still there. And hey, that's as easy as a pick up a phone and call to find out, hey, Mickey Loomis, do you think it would be a good idea for me to bring Jameis Winston in here as a backup to Michael Penix Jr.? But that said, Kirk Cousins still, for all intents and purposes, is a guy Free who you can respect as a human being, regardless of how you think it played out. Was he deceptive to the Falcons? Did they play him and getting Michael Penix Jr., so on and so forth? You still want a guy like that to land, especially if he feels like he still has some good years left in him. So that said, with all the teams that are kind of swirling around as possibilities for him to land, not named Pittsburgh Steelers, where would you like to see Kirk Cousins land?
Well, I think, borrowing a page from what Jarvis said with the Pittsburgh Steelers and Russell Wilson, I think that's the model that teams are looking for. And, why did the Steelers make the playoffs? Not to disparage Russell's performance, but it was mostly like, we're going to run the football and we're going to play great defense. And that's kind of how Russell, you just need to, manage a game and heave up a couple of deep balls to George Pickens, and that will be our formula for success until it's not. I think it's kind of the same way with Kirk Cousins at this stage in his career. It's like, you want to go to a team that can run the football and play good defense. And again, I think the Browns are the obvious sort of low-hanging fruit, because that's how their offense has been run this last couple of years, regardless of who the quarterback is, with Nick Chubb and all that. I know Nick Chubb is not the same player he was a few years ago. The offensive line isn't nearly as good, so they'll have to figure that whole thing out. But then when, if you're able to retain Myles Garrett, then, you should have the foundation for a good defense. We've seen that defense play at a high level not too long in the distant past. So I think the Browns make the most sense for just like Kirk, just come in, manage the game, hand the ball off, and we'll try to win every game 20-17. And that's kind of the formula for that team moving forward.
And I think, and to be honest with you, I feel like, let me say this. So this will be second year of Kirk coming off the Achilles injury. So I feel like you have to worry about too much from that standpoint. And like before he got hurt, the elbow and all that stuff. Before that he had issues with that. He was playing really good football. So I feel like there are going to be some teams that are out there, and I feel like probably the Titans probably make sense because they feel like they're trying to make it at least seem like they're not interested in the Cam Ward or Shadur Sanders. So I feel like being able to trade down, maybe get some draft picks and sign a guy like Kirk if they can get him for that 1.5 million or $2 million, they can take this opportunity to kind of trade down and build up their draft picks because like I said when Raheem Morris first came in, coach is trying to win games right now. I mean, I understand building for the future. That makes all the sense in the world. I get it, but those head coaches or new head coaches, rookie head coaches, those guys, young coaches, they are trying to win football games right now, and they want to try to because they understand like you don't just because you're newly hired doesn't mean you can't get fired. We saw that with the Patriots and the Raiders with Antonio Pierce. So I feel like this is one of those situations where I feel like the Titans probably makes sense as well.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Now, is the cost too high to retain a particular guy? We'll discuss when we take it under further review. This episode of our Atlanta Football Party is brought to you by FanDuel. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on it than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game. So even if you miss the opening tip-off or want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same game parlay. Now, using FanDuel's live betting feature helps because it keeps every moment of the game exciting. Whether you're backing a team for a late game rally or maybe picking a player to hit a clutch three, never feel like you're missing out on a chance to make something happen. Plus, the app is easy to use. And when you win, you get paid instantly. Now, right now, FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. So Aaron, Drew Dalman would like to run it back with the Falcons, according to our guy, D. Orlando Ledbetter of the AJC. So first off, how encouraging is that for the Falcons that Dalman wants to remain a Falcon?
It's very encouraging, right? The key for the offensive line is maintain that continuity. We've had 2 years in a row where the Falcons have had the same 5 starters. And so especially going into year 1 of Michael Penix Jr., you want to have year 3 of that offensive line maintaining that continuity so that's something that you can kind of set and forget. It doesn't mean that there won't be changes into the future along that offensive line, but at least that interior, if you can secure Drew Dalman's services, then, Chris Lindstrom's probably going to play another 5 years in Atlanta. We'll see, if Matthew Bergeron can earn a second contract, but, he's got 2 more years left on his rookie contract. And if you can keep Drew Dalman and those guarantees over the first, 2-3 years on a new contract, like you have your interior sort of solidified for the next 2 or 3 years in Atlanta. And so I think that's a positive thing for Michael Penix to get off to the best possible start he can for his NFL career.
Jarvis, good to hear that Drew Dalman is desirous of staying right here in Atlanta.
Absolutely, because you want that continuity on the offensive line. I think that probably matters a little bit more than any other position group on the field, in my humble opinion. Because those guys have to be in lockstep when it comes to stepping the right way, stepping in the right time. Having a feel for each other when it comes to double teams and when I'm supposed to slip up. I know that Chris Lindstrom and Drew, they have their timing down because they've been together for so long. And I think that when you have that type of continuity, it makes life so much easier for a guy like Michael Penix, like Aaron mentioned. So I think keeping that group together, and keeping him around makes a lot of sense. And I think that, with Drew actually saying out loud that he wants to come back, and because, a lot of times, agents probably gets in guys' ears like, hey, man, don't talk about this. And, we're just going to let the the business play out. I let my agent handle all that stuff. Normally you get that type of answer, right? But for him to say, hey, I want to come back, it makes a lot of sense, because I was looking at some averages as far as contract for new centers. That thing around about $12-13 million. So the fact that he wants to come back, hey, bro, what about
a little
7 or 8?
hometown discount?
So it's good to hear that he wants to be here. That's for sure.
Yeah. And Travis, think about this Super Bowl that we just saw, right? Everybody, of course, is talking about the D-line for the Eagles and what that looked like in the trenches. But let's be real. We saw that O-line, largest, tallest, and all that stuff for the Eagles that you've ever seen in Super Bowl history. We saw the difference that it made when Landon Dickerson was in at left guard for the Eagles, and the continuity they needed, like the moments where it looked like Landon Dickerson wasn't going to be there. There was a collective gasp, if you will. And we saw what it looked like when, unfortunately, the Kansas City Chiefs had to move Joe Thuney around, and what they're going to have to look into in the offseason, because like Jarvis said, a second here, a half second there, and look what happens to the rhythm for a guy like even Patrick Mahomes. So continuity. And Drew Dalman is a guy too who every year has exponentially gotten better. And I think that's also important too. If you've seen improvement from him year over year, why not? Now, Jarvis just mentioned it too, Bree, so I'm going to go back to it. Considering what that cost might be, what's the case that you make for Terry Fontenot to retain Drew Dalman?
Yeah, I mean, the cost is really going to be the challenge for the Falcons. At a certain point, you're going to be like, what are we paying? You're like, Drew Dalman, we need you, but like, I don't know if we need you that bad if the cost starts creeping up. So I think that's going to be the challenge for the Falcons. But I think, the case for why you're willing to maybe pay a little bit more than you would ideally want is because that continuity that we're talking about. You have a young quarterback coming in. B, like, this is not really the offseason where you're going to have a ton of center options like you might have had in the draft or free agency. Drew Dalman is widely considered to be by far the best free agent center to hit the market. So if you go out and try to get a veteran to replace him, that's going to be a downgrade, even if you're saving money. And so that you don't know if that's going to mesh, because again, that continuity really matters for the offensive line, and the center is kind of the core of that continuity when it comes to those things. So I think if you're Terry Fontenot and you're going to pay a little bit extra, you just kind of look around the landscape and you're like, this is, maybe not the lesser of two evils, but, I'm throwing a wrench into my, potential offense by not being able to spend a little bit of money on Drew Dalman in these next couple of years.
Yeah, and JD, you look at a player, and going back to Landon Dickerson, not that you would want Drew Dalman to have to do something else other than play center, but you do have to also look at the ability for a guy like that who can just do something in an emergency situation. You don't want a Joe Thuney situation, but on the same token, sometimes that flexibility and the ability to just kind of move across the line does kind of help. But does it help enough with the tool set, the toolkit, if you will, that Drew Dalman has to make the case for him based on at least what the center market is dictating right now?
Yeah, and that's why I feel like it's very interesting, because I never forget when I came across an article. I believe I can't remember exactly what outlet it was, and they were talking about how, like Free mentioned, he was the best center in this free agent class. And when you talk about that, it's like, oh, okay, I can ask for $12 million annually, from an average standpoint. But I think if the conversation started to creep up towards that number, I won't be surprised if they take a look at Ryan Newsel, right? Because he was able to step in and give you some good snaps. Now, I don't know, but that kind of goes against what you always say. You always want to be able to draft players to be good enough to be able to get that second contract, and that's exactly what Drew Dalman has done. So, but I feel like just from a negotiating standpoint, playing a little hardball, I feel like if you start to get up to that 12 and $13 million, oh man, I might have to see what's going on with Mr. Newsel. You know what I'm saying? He's a lefty. He's gonna be snapping to a lefty, right? But I feel like this is the type of deal that Terry is gonna get done, because this is his guy. This is the guy he drafted. So to be able to have him go into a second contract up front on the offensive line, I feel like that'll be a feather in his cap for sure. And I wouldn't be surprised if he pays a little bit more to get it done.
I like that concept. I like that thought of that being the thing that drives the bus. Reason being, we all know, and we knew it then, and I think everyone has kind of low-key conceded it. Kirk Cousins should have been benched sooner than he was. But because of that mega contract that was looming overhead, I think there was a little bit of trepidation on pulling the trigger until the trigger absolutely had to be pulled in Flowery Branch, right?
Yeah.
The reason I say that is because you also feel like one of the reasons that Terry Fontenot may have been saved in his job was because of the guy who ended up coming in to replace Kirk Cousins, Michael Penix Jr. So in other words, he probably saved the job, saved your draft class for all intents and purposes for 2024 because of the injuries to guys like Braylon Trice and Dorless and even Rukaruro for a minute. So yeah, Jarvis, I think you might be onto something. Keeping a guy like Drew Dalman also makes the case like, hey, as I'm trying to build a case to continue to save my job, exactly, I drafted a guy that ended up being developed into a viable center who's considered the best and most viable center in free agency coming up. So sometimes it's not always about just what's on the field, but sometimes it's those factors off the field that are kind of pulling at the decision that you make as well. And they got a decision to make because the Falcons are currently more than $10 million over the salary cap. And they got 30 players set to enter free agency when the league year begins in March that they have to think about what they're going to do with. So we'll chop it up on whether or not the Falcons should retain or release these free agents when we run it back. So, guys, we're not going to get into all 30 because obviously we've touched on about a third of those free agents over the last few weeks of talking through who should stay and who should go. But there are a lot that we actually didn't touch on. So I'm going to give you guys a challenge. All right. Each guy that we talk about, you make the case for whether you want to retain them or whether they should be released. And it's up to you. The case could be just release them, period. The case could be just retain them, period. But if you want to make a case about it, this is your chance to play GM. So we're going to start with you, GM Aaron Freeman. Nate Landman, you retain him or you release him?
I know the answer to this question.
I mean,
we're coming in hot, Free. We're coming in hot.
Yes.
I mean, I'm pretty meh on it. Like, I guess that basically means I'm leaning release him. But like, I wouldn't be upset if the Falcons bring back Nate. Again, I think he's a good backup special teams contributor that's worth bringing back. But I feel like, Troy Anderson and JD Bertrand can basically do the same thing and probably bring a little bit more, in that regard. So yeah, release him, I guess, I don't know.
I mean, for me, see, Nate Landman has a special place in my heart because
if you give someone a nickname like Landman in this case,
Landman, what I'm saying? Like, I would love for the Falcons to bring him back in some capacity, and I think a backup role and a special teams guy. I'm sure Marquise Williams would love to have him, mostly on running down on special teams because I just feel like he's that type of guy. But when you think about the limitations that he has as a linebacker, and I feel like that'll be money that you can use to go somewhere else that will be able to be a contributor for you, maybe in your starting 11. I just don't think that he's that type of guy. And just look at the way he played when he came back off an injury. He wasn't even the guy that I gave the nickname, right? He just didn't look like himself. So I feel like this was, as much as it pains me to admit this, I feel like the Landman has to find somewhere else to play.
Oh God, I know that was a tough one for you. I know that was a tough one. So I'm going to give you maybe a little bit easier one, JD. Taquan Graham.
That's an interesting one, right? Because like Taquan Graham, what is his asset? What is this trait that I like? He's solid in the run game. I feel like the Falcons have a lot of D tackles that are solid in a run game, right, against the run. So I don't necessarily think that if I don't even know what the contract would even look like because the injuries and just being a specialty guy. I feel like this defense needs more guys that can do a lot of things really well and not necessarily
Yeah.
one thing. And as far as specifically for defensive linemen, I'm okay if you can rush the passer really well because they don't have a guy who rushes the passer really, really well. So if he doesn't fall into that category, I might have to consider moving on. And like I said, Taquan Graham has been solid, but I would consider moving on from him as well.
Yeah, I'd move on too. You look at this really strong D tackle class, and so it's like I feel like Graham at this point is a back end rotational guy, and I'd rather start developing another young guy that may deliver on some upside in 2 or 3 years, and necessarily keep Taquan Graham on like a 1-year veteran minimum deal.
Jarvis, what about your thoughts on retaining or releasing Kadero Hodge?
Oh, he's the type of guy that I'm sure you'll be able to get a nice value with a contract. So yeah, I'm definitely bringing him back because he's serviceable. He's actually excellent in on special teams. Made the Pro Bowl, right?
Oh, yeah.
And then he's serviceable. Be able to step in for someone who may hurt if you need him to come in and play wide receiver as well. So that's all you can ask for with a guy like that. So yeah, I would definitely bring. I figure out a way to bring Kadero Hodge because it's going to make a lot of sense, in dollars, right? So that's what they're looking for. They're bargain basement shopping. They're in that era again. So I'm sure they'll be able to figure out come to a deal that makes sense for both parties.
Kadero Hodge free?
Yeah. After Drew Dalman, I think he's the number 2 priority to bring back of the guys that you're like, they definitely need to bring that guy back. Like, why would you let him walk out the door, given his value on special teams, as Jarvis said, the depth he adds at the wide receiver position? So he's number 2 on that list for me in terms of priority re-signings.
Yeah, and I like it as well because I think you want to give Marquise Williams as much as he can work with, that if a Zach Robinson or a Jeff Ulbrich needed that person, they could also come in for duty as well. Contavious Street, Jarvis.
This is an interesting one because, like I said, he kind of falls in the same category as Taquan Graham for me. I think he's solid against the run. He can give you some push up the middle as well. But I'm all for this Falcons team having the young guys that they drafted in the middle, Ruka Roro, Brandon Dorless, all of those guys that they brought in. Those guys have to come in and step up. And whoever is going to keep those guys from being able to do that or show that, I can't have them on my roster, like, because the easy thing to do is to play the veteran and know exactly what you're going to get versus not playing the rookie and not necessarily figuring out what his ceiling is, in this rookie contract, so you can know what you're going to be working with once that contract is up. So I feel like the quicker guys like Rook and Brandon can get in there, and whatever guy that might slow that down, I'm not bringing them back on this roster.
Yeah, between him and Taquan Graham, I'd probably be more open to Street coming back just because I think he brings a little bit more juice as a pass rusher, a little bit more versatile. But I think Jarvis is right? At this stage, he's a back-end rotational guy, and he's blocking some of these young guys from playing. So I would let him walk.
Jarvis Storm Norton, stay or go?
I figure if it makes sense, if the money makes sense, right? If they can find a nice deal to come to, I feel like he's a solid guy to come in for you when somebody is hurt. Swing tackles have value in this league, so and Storm has been fine when he's come in to play for this team. So I'll figure out a way to try to get a deal done with him.
Yeah, I'm bringing him back. I feel like the Falcons should definitely draft a backup tackle in this draft, and so that guy could come in and take Storm Norton's job. But I think you want to have a sort of a proven option there, just in the event of injuries and maybe that rookie isn't necessarily ready or whatnot. So Storm Norton should come back, but he might go into the summer maybe a little bit on the roster bubble.
T, can I say this real quick?
Yeah.
So Aaron really has some Bill Belichickian type vibes to him when it comes to like a general manager. Like I like when him putting that general manager hat on. He like, yeah, man, figure out so I can get somebody in here to come in and take your position. Like, oh shoot, man. So yeah, man, I like Free with this Belichickian GM hat he has on right now. Yeah, man.
Yeah, Free plays no games. It's just straight no chaser.
Straight no chaser. I love it.
Yep. We're gonna let you go. It's thank you for your service, or you can stay with conditions. And we're gonna tell you the conditions up front. Take it or leave it.
Yes, there you go.
Take it or leave it, Ross Dwelly. What about Ross Dwelly for you guys?
No, pass.
Okay, well, moving right along. Antonio Hamilton.
Yeah. Next,
Antonio Hamilton.
He can go too.
Yeah, I'm out of here. Like, I'm tired of spin the wheel cats. Yeah, spin the wheels on corners and
He was hurt. He didn't. He was struggling in coverage. Like
can't stay on the field, man. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Even good.
Yeah, your best ability. In his case, your best ability really is your availability, which didn't really exist on a consistent basis. So yeah, agreed. Those two. Thank you for your service, Avery Williams.
I'm kind of out on Avery Williams because I feel like he doesn't really bring anything from a return game. Like I don't expect anything from him when it comes to return.
Which is disappointing because remember he had flashes.
Right.
Even coming in some reserve duty free as a running back for the running back room before he went down for injury for the season. So yeah, JD, I think you might be right. Maybe need to move on.
Yeah.
I have a soft spot for Avery Williams, not simply from a return specialist, but just like special teams coverage and whatnot, because I really feel like he's really good. Like him and Kadero Hodge are kind of their two best coverage guys. So I would bring him back, but I could understand why, if you're I do feel I agree with you. Like I think you're hoping that you can maybe get an upgrade at that return spot. And if Avery Williams isn't a returner, it's like what else are you doing? And so he's kind of on the borderline, but I would bring him back just because special teams matters.
Special teams absolutely does matter. We'll continue to shop it up on retaining or releasing free agents when we come back. This episode of our Atlanta Football Party is brought to you by FanDuel. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started. And there's no place better to get in on it than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game. So even if you miss the opening tip-off or want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. Those who love using FanDuel's live betting feature say they love it because it keeps every moment of the game exciting. So whether you're backing a team for a late game rally or picking a player to hit a clutch three, never feel like you've missed out on a chance because you haven't. Plus, the app is easy to use, and when you win, you get paid instantly. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. So Free, continuing with retaining and releasing free agents, obviously the Falcons have to make some decisions soon. They are a little over $10 million over the salary cap. They've got 30 free agents to evaluate. We've gone through a number of them and said where we think they should land. So let's keep that train moving. Kyle Hinton, do the Falcons release him? Do the Falcons retain him?
Release, if they're going to bring back one of these guards, I'd much rather Elijah Wilkinson be the guy just because we've seen him start games and be a functional starter. He also has versatility to play more than one position. So that to me is good depth. But I'm out on Kyle Hinton.
You, Jarvis, stay or go?
I don't know. I actually kind of like Kyle Hinton, to be honest with you. I feel like he's a guy that, has definitely some backup potential for me. So if, that's what I'm bringing him back for. Yeah, no doubt. I wouldn't mind bringing Kyle back, because it would be on a bargain basement type situation. So for sure, I wouldn't mind bringing back Kyle.
And what about Elijah Wilkinson? I know he's a guy, Jarvis, that we'd spoken with a couple of years ago, kind of were rooting for him to come here and do well. Keep him or release him?
I would probably rather release him because who knows what that number would look like as far as from a salary standpoint. I don't probably wouldn't be that expensive because of the situation that he's in as a veteran, being, kind of trying to figure out a way to, kind of stick around in the league. But I would probably, give, like I said, mentioned before, I would give that money, those small coins to a guy like Hinton, and kind of just leave the veteran piece, because I have a young guy and I have a guy that you just signed up, and Chris Lindstrom, and then Bergeron, who's a young guy who's been managed to stay pretty healthy throughout his career so far. So yeah, I feel like I wouldn't mind keeping Hinton and getting rid of a guy like Elijah Wilkinson.
Free, stay or go.
I'll keep Wilkinson. I just like what he's done more than I like what Kyle Hinton's done. So I'll keep Wilkinson over Hinton.
That's fair. And Eddie Goldman, free. Do you keep him or do you release him? Heck, he might release himself, but would you keep him or release him?
Well, if you keep Eddie Goldman, as you said, like there's no telling that he will decide to play football. And so
right.
I want to give a shout out to Eddie Goldman because I think he far exceeded anybody's expectations this past year.
Yes, he did. Yeah, so, he stayed the course this year. He stayed the course.
I think he played well enough to be worth bringing back on like a cheap 1-year deal or whatever. But, because of his history of basically deciding whether or not he wants to play football and not being non-committal to that, that feels like you could spend that money on somebody that you have a little bit more faith will actually show up and be there week 1 and then continue to be there in week 18. So I'd probably let Eddie Goldman walk.
Yeah, I would let him walk with the idea of potentially bringing him back. Here's why I say that, because Eddie Goldman is a guy that is a little healthy, right? He's a plugger, type guy. He's a run stopper. Remember I said that I don't want guys that can potentially get in the way of that guy, but if you're gonna have a guy that specifically is a heavy package type guy, I would let him walk initially, and then if I'm not able to find a young guy to potentially drop into space, like Aaron mentioned earlier, there are a lot of different type of flavors, as Terry Fontenot says, at that D tackle spot coming out this year in the draft. If I'm not able to get one of those guys, then that'll probably be a late addition, because he might need to have some time to think about whether or not he wants to play. And we know that he doesn't lie to the team. He played the full season this year. So hey, big head, what I'm saying? We couldn't find nobody that could potentially replace you. So how about you come on back for a 1-year deal at $2.3 million? You know what I'm saying? Like, yeah, that kind of sounds good. Good. Yeah, let's do it.
And hey, I guess if you're a big head, you kind of know it's a 1-year short-term deal for you. So it's all good if you get the big head, right? Yeah. So what about Liam McCullough? Do we underestimate or overestimate or just flat out forget about the long snapper?
You got to bring your long snapper back. Liam McCullough has done nothing wrong, and give that man a 5-year contract for like veteran, like the bottom shelf of long snappers. They make basically the veteran minimum. You get like $2 as a signing bonus. Yeah, of course. Bring back Liam McCullough. The NFL teams don't pay long snappers, so like, yeah, man, lock that man up for like a 10-year contract because he ain't going nowhere.
Yeah, come on, man. What are we talking about here? But bring the man back, give him the contract. He can be the longest tenure Falcon in Falcons history. Like 15 years. Like all you doing is doggone long snapping, man. It's like that's one of those things where like, man, maybe I should have doggone looked into long snapping before,
right?
I got him up out of there, like shoot, I give you 1.2 million vet minimum.
Lifetime of benefits.
Come on,
as long as you stay long snapper for 4 years, hey. Yeah, not a bad way to live. But here's an intriguing one for you guys. Rondale Moore, because he was a guy who we wanted to see what could he have done on the field. Didn't quite get to see as much of it as we'd hoped. But would you bring him back to see what it could be in 25?
For me, I think if you're going to bring back Rondale Moore to push for that return job, I'm kind of intrigued for Rondale Moore more as a running back than a wide receiver because he's so good with the ball in his hand. So if they're going to do some interesting wrinkles with him offensively and maybe running some gadget plays, I'd be interested in bringing him back. But, purely as a wide receiver, like I feel like you'll be able to find better options than Rondale Moore at this point in time.
Yeah. I don't feel like Rondale Moore's talent kind of what Free's kind of circling around. I don't feel like his talent is worth bringing back, right? Because like you have a guy in Ray that can pretty much do whatever he can do. And we've seen that Ray was pretty solid. And I know that in those Falcons postcasts, Free was a little upset that Ray was getting all these doggone targets. You know what I'm saying? He felt like they should have been going to Cal Fitz a little bit more. But those targets that he was getting, I feel like, Ray was pretty consistent as far as being able to make plays when the ball did come his way. So I don't need another guy like that on my roster. So I'm cool on Rondale Moore. I'm out.
Yeah, because you're looking at him, JD, like he's just a guy, and there are enough just the guys on this roster, at least as it stands. Free. What about Brandon Parker?
Yeah, if we can bring back Storm Norton, I'll take Storm Norton over Brandon Parker, so he can go.
He can go.
I'm taking Storm all day, every day.
What about Kevin King?
I'm letting Kevin King walk. He did some good work as a dime safety. Jerry Gray did him a solid from their days in Green Bay of coming back after 2 injury-marred years. But I've seen enough of Kevin King. He can go too.
Yes, it's time. It's time. Yeah, it's time to move on from Jags. Like the Falcons don't need to sign any more Jags. Either you can replace those Jags. You know how you replace those Jags? You draft guys that have that potential and to grow, and you raise their ceilings by developing them. And I think that Drew Dalman is a prime case for that, right? Find a Drew Dalman, that in the 4th round or the 5th round, right? And develop those guys and draft them, develop them, and then you can be sitting here. You don't have to worry about having to sign guys off the street that don't like football anymore and they're not playing, and guys who've been dealing with injuries all their career. So I'm done with the Jags. Yep. Yeah,
or like a Tyler Algier, if you will. Riley Patterson, where we're going?
No, he can go.
We're moving on. Okay,
I don't see why you even thought about it that long. Yeah, Riley Patterson can kick rocks, pound.
Be nice.
He can get his behind on somewhere. Go on, get on, and you can take Young Way Cool with you too, Riley. That's how I feel. You know what I'm saying? Like you can just get gone. Young, undrafted free agent. Like come on,
something there. Oh, but Free has thoughts.
It's disrespectful to throw Young Way Cool in the same boat as Riley Patterson. That's all I'm saying. You can want to move on from Young Way Cool. That's fine, Jarvis. But to throw him in the same boat as Riley Patterson, that's disrespectful.
I'm not throwing him in the same boat. I'm just understanding
that. Jarvis, you got it. It was cute though. It was. You slid it in.
Both of them are kickers. They're in the NFL. They were on the same team. You know what I'm saying? Like Riley might be able to offer him something that, like, hey, bro, I understand how it is to be a free agent. You know what I'm saying? So, hey, I'm getting cut. I'm not being brought back. So we know you about to get cut too. So I can give you a ride, bro. Like, come on, man. We family. We all the same position.
You get an Uber XL for Young Way Cool going out the building, and Riley Patterson has to. No, you got to treat Young Way with respect as you
put respect on Young Way's name, darn it, Jarvis.
So you want to put him in person versus give him a phone call? Like, man, come on in. We can talk to you. We'll have a conversation.
Yeah. At a minimum, he's earned that. But has Josh Woods earned the retain, or is it time for him to go too?
Special teams? No, I'm good.
Good on him.
Yeah, I'm cool. You Jack.
Damone Harris.
Oh, I'd be interested in him bringing him back to see if he can add some competition to camp, but that's really it. Like I'm not bringing him back thinking he's going to have a big role with the team. But maybe he'll push D'Angelo Malone or something like that.
Yeah, I think he's earned a training camp invite for sure. Okay. Yeah, I think he earned at least that. Get an opportunity to make the team. So yeah, I like what Damone brought to the table. He was playing well when nobody was early in the season.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Did we talk about Robert Burns? I don't want to skip him in case you want to retain him.
Most people listening to the show have no idea who Robert Burns is.
Okay, moving right along. Harrison Hand. Anybody know who Harrison Hand is? That is.
Anything for Harrison Hand too.
Moving right along. So we will end on a note that I think you guys will appreciate, because there were definitely moments throughout the season where we saw some uptick And even throughout training camp with James Smith-Williams, do you retain him or release?
For me, like I remember that 4-game stretch where James Smith-Williams
Yes.
was out playing Matthew Judon, and I'm like, if I can get a full season of that, I'll take that back. But at the same time, like as Jarvis is saying, like James Smith-Williams is a very sort of one-dimensional player. He's very good against the run. You know, occasionally he'll get a pressure against the quarterback. And you're like, oh, James Smith-Williams showed up, pop for that one play in a game. I feel like you can do better than that, but I also think, you know, there are worse options for you at outside linebacker than James Smith-Williams. So I would probably move on from him, expecting it's kind of the same conversation that Jarvis just had about Eddie Goldman. Like if we get to July or something like that and we haven't upgraded, good God, I just imagine not upgrading. You know, like
that's possible, Free. That is possible.
That's what I'm saying.
That is possible.
It is the
past 7 years.
Yeah, so maybe bring him back for training camp if the Falcons are just Falcon this offseason.
Yeah. I agree with what Free said. You know, I hope they don't have to bring James Smith-Williams back.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't be mad if they brought him back. But I hope
they don't have to.
I hope they don't have to bring.
That's fair. That's fair. Well, there's a guy that the Falcons will bring back because that guy said, "Yeah, no." So Nola, and with a certain ranking, it's understandable. We'll discuss when we come back. So ESPN's Jeremy Fowler wrote an article titled NFL Overhaul Tiers, where he outlined 11 tiers from still major contenders to, still rebuilding. He ranked the Falcons in the middle of the pack with the sixth tier of stuck in the middle, but a move or two away. That tier also included the Cowboys, Colts, 49ers. FYI, guys, the Bucs were one tier ahead in the headed on the right track category. And FYI, the Saints were ranked in the 9th category, new coach, new direction. All of that said, particularly the Falcons being in that 6th tier, stuck in the middle, a move or two away. Jarvis, did Fowler get it right on that one? Did he get it right putting the Bucs a tier ahead? Did he get it right on both or none?
I don't see what he sees when it comes to the Bucs, to be honest with you. I mean, Baker Mayfield is mid. I'm sorry. As much as people want to jump all on that bandwagon, and I understand why. If you look at the numbers and all that stuff, I get it. But Baker is going to bake, you know, when it comes to the real time. You're playing against real competition, and that happens in the playoffs. So I just don't buy into him. I'm probably a little biased because I just don't like him, to be honest with you. So this is football and Jarvis not liking him type conversation right now. So I definitely don't see that. But the Falcons being 1 or 2 moves away, yeah, I feel like if it's stuck in the middle, they're right there. I mean, they were 8-9 last year, so it makes sense. And I could see them going 8-9 again next year if they don't upgrade the outside linebacker spot or defensive end, whatever doggone base defense you want to run. Like somebody who lines up over the tackle, you know, and can get home. Unless they upgrade that, they're going to remain in that spot. So I think he got it right with the Falcons, but I just don't see that whole Bucs situation. I don't understand that one.
I think he got it right for all of these teams. Like I've always felt like the Falcons were like the NFC equivalent of the Colts, which is just like kind of a mid team that, you know, the difference is the Falcons like to pretend that they're more than a mid team and like, y'all have been paying attention for the last 7 years, have you? Because y'all are mid. So I feel like putting them in the same tier as the Colts makes perfect sense. And I think with the Bucs, like the Bucs have shown, like, even though we sit here and think like them and the Falcons are close and the Falcons swept them last year and all that stuff, but the Bucs the difference between the Bucs is that they know how to finish. Like I looked it up this morning.
Getting it done.
It's like if you look at their records the last 2 years under Baker Mayfield after Thanksgiving, they're 10-3. And the Falcons are 5-8 over that same period of time. Like the Bucs may not always start the season strong, but they finish strong. And that's, to me, what they can hang their hat on, that when they need to go out there and win games, regardless of what Jarvis thinks of Baker Mayfield, he's going out there and helping that team win games. And the Falcons have not been able to get the same thing. So I feel like putting the Bucs on a higher tier than the Falcons at this point in time, until the Falcons can prove that they can finish the season strong and go out there and win the games that they need to. Again, we're all hoping that for Michael Penix. that they're going to be in a different category, this time a year from now. But until they go out there and prove it, this is, I think, a fair ranking of all these teams.
Yeah, I think that's that show and prove that we keep seeing from the Bucs every season, that we count them out. We think they're second place at best coming out of the division, or they're going to be middling in the division, and then they just up and win the division. So yeah, until that changes, I can kind of see why Fowler went that way. Now, funny thing, you should mention the Bucs being a step ahead in Fowler's rankings, ahead of the Falcons. The Saints were 3 rankings or 3 categories down. The Saints, that same team, Jarvis, that requested to interview Falcons tight end coach Kevin Koger for their vacant offensive coordinator position, but Koger declined, according to NFL Network's Ian Rappaport. And hey, maybe because of that ranking, there's that. He knows that it's a bit of a clusterfuffle in New Orleans. But how do you like the decline for a little more pettiness in the rivalry?
Yeah, you know what? I feel like that's I feel like that's kind of like really one of those situations where there's a little petty involved, but there's also some self-awareness involved in there too, because Koger seemed to be the go-to Rooney Rule type interview. You know what I'm saying? Like, I understand maybe going on a couple of those just to get used to interviewing, preparing for it, going actually executing. I feel like he had got enough of that, right? I think he had interviewed for 2 open spots, coming into before being offered to interview for this one. So when you understand like why you're doing things, like you have to do it to where it benefits you. And I don't think for him to go on a 3rd Rooney Rule interview, that wouldn't benefit him at all. And also, he's like, I don't want to interview with y'all, because why? Why would I want to go to New Orleans, and especially when when you look around the league, like the Saints probably aren't going to be good for quite some time, because the light is getting very dark. It is dark right now.
It's dark,
in New Orleans. So I feel like there was no reason for Koger to take this interview.
Yeah, for me, I think Jarvis nailed it. It felt like the previous interviews. I know one was Cowboys. I think the other one was maybe with the Browns. Felt like they were just kind of checking boxes for the Rooney Rule. Now, you can say in the Saints case, because he did work with Kellen Moore in his last year with the Chargers, that this could have been legitimate an interview, but you do like the little pettiness of throwing in, like, it's the Saints. Like, nah, man, I'm good. And so I agree with Jarvis. It's a little bit of self-awareness. It's a little bit of pettiness, all rolled into one, and it just makes it perfect as far as the rivalry goes.
Yeah, because I think if you're going to, and you get a little bit of an insight because you got that guy in your front office in Terry Fontenot, and whether or not they all know what the Saints are right now. Like Kellen Moore, hey, congratulations to him. It's a great opportunity because you're getting an opportunity to be a head coach coming off of a Super Bowl win, and that's a great call. But on the same token, you can take instances like a Ben Johnson who says, hey, I'm not going to make a move from this Detroit Lions team until I make the move that I want to make. So that can also be it. Like with Kevin Koger, like, yeah, we had some bumps and bruises, but if I look at the tight ends room, and I'm going to say this like outside of Kyle Pitts, right? Because I'm going to say with what he might have in even like a Charlie Werner, or there actually is a decent tight end class in the 2025 NFL draft as well. So I think that there's some opportunities for him to work with a really great group of tight ends, to run it back a second time with Zach Robinson. And what if this offense gets that much better? I'm talking, takes that exponential jump. Then think about it. Wouldn't he get a better opportunity next year? So I think that's the other piece there as well. Like, why would I do this? I got an opportunity to be involved with one of what I think will be, and I think what you guys would believe as well, would be one of the more potent offenses in the NFL. And if you can do that and do that for a year and say you were part of that, you get a better job. I don't blame him. I mean, I hate that for my home city team. Like, it's a hot mess down there. But yeah, why would you walk into that fire? I think he's good too.
I think he might be onto something, T, because you think about this tight end draft class, and then being able to potentially, like, man, we talking about Kyle Pitts, like he's not going to be around. What is going on here? Do we know something? But yeah, I feel like this is an opportunity for him to continue to make moves, because if this offense goes how I think it's going to go, in 2025, there are going to be a lot of guys in some conversations about, potentially moving on or at least having interviews, because once these offenses do well, they're trying to come and get that OC.
Copycat.
Like Zach Robinson has a really good season this year. That offense puts up some points and they get into a top 10, top 5 scoring offense. He's gonna be on someone's radar. For sure at the end of this year, because it happens every year. It happens all the time.
Yep, it's the copycat league. So, Kevin Koger, congratulations to you for saying thanks, but no thanks. That was the right call. And thanks to our everydayers for making the Atlanta Football Party your first listen of the day. Be sure to stop by Locked On Falcons with Aaron and his frequent guest analyst Jarvis as your second listen, and check out some of Tori's work at AtlantaFalcons.com. Of course, she'll be back with us next week, and we will see you then.